I'm Marna. Thank you for joining me. So I just did the video on what negative self-talk is, how to recognize it, how to see what you're doing to yourself, and the link is right up here somewhere. If you have not seen it, the nutshell version is negative self-talk is that little voice in your head that sits there and tells you all the reasons why you are going to fail at anything, at being you, at not being good enough. It's that little voice that'll sit there and say, oh, you've got a spot on your chin. How can you go out in public looking like that? It's the little voice that says, you deserve to be treated badly in relationships. It's the little voice that says, if you're not perfect, why even bother trying? So how do we fight this? How do we minimize the effect that negative self-talk has on us? How do we recognize it and put a stop to it? Because this is something impacting your life. You deserve to be in control of it. Now, the very first thing you need to do is you need to learn to recognize it. Catch that inner critic. Notice when you're being self-critical. If you find yourself saying things to yourself that you wouldn't say to your best friend or you wouldn't say to a child, stop. I mean, really. Would you ever look at your best friend and say, honey, you need to go back to bed because you are a hot mess right now and you don't deserve to deal with real people? I've said it to myself. Have you? Would you say that to your best friend? Or would you sit there and say, okay, hon, come on, get up, get dressed. We're going to get you out of this. Which is the more supportive friend? You have to start being a friend to yourself at some point in time, especially since we are now in the age of social distancing and being around our physical support groups is so much more difficult. The next step is remembering that your thoughts and your feelings, while they may feel very real at the moment, are not reality. I know. We're sitting here talking about manifestation and how what we think becomes what we manifest. But it only becomes what we manifest if we choose to focus on it. Your thoughts and your feelings, particularly the negative ones, do not have to be your manifested reality. You have control over your thoughts. What you need to learn to do is how to take that mental step back. Observe your thoughts coming in. And I have a video somewhere about how to do this, how to observe your thoughts coming in. Once you do that, you can see the negative thoughts coming and you can choose. I'm not going to follow that thought pattern. I'm not going to think that way. When you do that, everything changes. If you've ever gone outside early in the morning and you see a spider web and it's got dew shining on it and the sun's hitting it just right and it looks like a bunch of crystals strung together and it's absolutely beautiful. If you walked through that same spider web in the middle of the night without knowing it was there, you would not be appreciating the beauty. You'd be going, ah, and doing that funky ninja dance that we all do when we walk into a spider web. That is the difference between seeing your thoughts coming to you and being caught in them. Which do you choose to do? Now, this little secret is one that really worked with me. I gave my inner critic a name. I personified her as someone separate from Marna. So now, when that inner voice starts, and like I said, this voice sounds a lot like my mother, I can sit there and say, oh no, Laverne, I am not listening to you today. I have got better things to do in my life than to be stuck listening to you be a downer. So what name can you give your inner critic? What can you do so that once your inner critic starts talking, you can talk back? Like I said, that one was a game changer for me. And now if I catch myself after sitting for 45 minutes telling myself that I can't possibly do whatever, oh, there I go, letting Laverne be in charge again. I know better than that. Laverne, you go back to your little hidey hole. I got things to do. And Laverne leaves. It's one of the insidious things about this negative self-talk is that once we start, it just kind of builds on itself. It's like watching a snowball roll down a hill and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So, stop it. Contain it. As soon as you catch yourself doing it, instead of giving in to the temptation to just keep it going, nope, Laverne, go back to your hidey hole. I don't have time to deal with the negativity right now. Now, the challenge in that is all of us are afraid that that negativity is telling us a truth that we're not going to catch. So if you think there's any possibility that there could be a truth involved in that, write it down. Journal it. Do not get caught in the trap of thinking in circles because you won't remember anything you think anyway. But write it out, journal it, and record it. And then at a later time, when you're not in a negative self-talk spiral, you can go back to it and see if there's any validity to what you've said. That is a part of the next point. If you change the negative to neutral, what changes does that make in your life? It's really, really hard to just stop doing something. It is much easier to shift what it is that you're doing. And sitting there and changing negative to positive may be a bit of a stretch for some people. If you are used to thinking, I'm fat, then there's no amount of mental gymnastics you can do to convince yourself to say, I'm skinny instead. You will look in the mirror and you'll spark off that negative self-chain and you'll say, no, I'm fat. Look at these chipmunk cheeks. Skinny people do not have cheeks like this. Skinny people do not have a double chin. And you'll tear your attempt at positivity apart. But you can change that negativity to a neutral meaning. Okay. Yeah, there may be a little bit of extra weight there. That's fine. That means I have extra insulation against the cold. Means there is more of me to love. I am going to be 50 in a couple of weeks. It's okay for me to have a little bit of extra padding in the face. At least, I have smile lines instead of frown lines. Although I have to admit, my what the fuck lines do run pretty deep. It is normal for people to start developing a double chin. More of us have it than we realize. And you know why you don't realize how many people feel this way? Because you're not in their heads. You're only in yours. How much do you really notice how the people that you work with look? How often do you sit there and dissect what someone's wearing? How often do you sit there and say, oh, I can't believe Victoria wore that to work today? Or, I can't believe Mary is letting herself be seen in public without makeup on. Oh my God. Becky, look at her butt. Really, how often do you do that? I bet you apply those thoughts to yourself a lot more than you do to anyone else, because we're all kind of egocentric. But the truth is, the amount of time that you spend critiquing your coworkers is pretty indicative of the amount of time they spend critiquing you. So if you're worried because you've wore the same pair of black slacks 3 days in a row, nobody noticed but you. Nobody really puts that much thought. They say, oh, look at Marna, she's always put together. Look at Marna, she is always on time. Look at Marna, she is the one we can rely on. Not, I can't believe that bitch wore the same pants 3 days in a row. So once you realize that you are not being critiqued by people outside of yourself, that makes it a lot easier for you to look at the interior critic, and say, Laverne, go on. I ain't got time right now. So those are some tips for dealing with that inner critic. Little steps that you can take to start working to negate that negative self-talk, or at least minimize the effect that it has on your life. You truly do deserve to have the life of abundance. And just because you have an inner critic telling you you don't, that's just an extra challenge for you to overcome. You can do that. Look how many challenges you've overcome already. I mean, really, how'd you get this far again? We're all so much more accomplished than we believe we are. I'm Marna, and thank you for joining me.